We'd been engaged for 4 days. I dived for 7 years and Sue had dived for about 2 years. Sue was a relatively experienced diver. In going down, it was quite a normal descent. As often happens in the Bristol Channel, there was a fairly strong current, and as we were swimming into the current, it was fairly hard work. After a relatively short period of time, Sue signalled that she wasn't at all comfortable. The standard signal for a diver for that is just a shaking of the hand, and as soon as she did that, then she took off towards the surface, really without any warning.
Sue was risking her life. Racing to the surface so fast could leave her paralysed. Down below, John knew there was nothing he could do to help.
If I had shot up really quickly at the same sort of speed as Sue, I could have injured myself. And so having 2 injured divers on the surface is worse than having 1 injured diver on the surface.
The accident taught John a lesson he will never forget. Diving is a safe sport, but underwater it's still an alien world. It puts people and their equipment under pressure. Managing pressure is what does.
On the day, we met early to pick up our cylinders and get them filled at the compressor station.
These cylinders are a diver's life support system. Inside each one is a phone box full of air, compressed down so much that they get heavier as they're filled. The air inside weighs as much as 3 bags of sugar. Let out all at once, that air would blow a diver's head off. So a mouthpiece releases it slowly, regulating the pressure to keep the diver alive for up to an hour underwater.
I've got some readjustments.
Divers know that everything depends on their equipment working perfectly, so they check and double-check it on the surface. Down below, it could be too late. It's going up and down that can cause problems. Divers must wait for their bodies to adapt to the change on their skin and inside their heads.
All diving masks have got a nose built into the mask, either hidden in underneath, or in my case I've got the mask with a nose built into the front, and you just pinch your nose and blow and your ears pop.
That pod sign, it means the pressure inside your ears has adjusted to the pressure outside. It's one of the first tricks Charlotte Hope teaches her trainee divers. As Charlotte dives deeper, she can feel her body being squeezed. That's pressure. It happens because the weight of the water in a column directly above is pressing on her skin.
The deeper a diver goes, the more weight of water there is pushing down on there. You can see that as I descend, with this empty plastic bottle, the bottle is crushed as the air is compressed inside.
The air is still inside the bottle. It's just being compressed into a smaller space by the force of water weighing down from above. The plastic buckles because it's not strong enough to withstand that force. This glass jar is open at the bottom. As the pressure increases, it forces water into the jar, reducing the surface area of the air trapped at the top. It shows there's a link between force, pressure, and surface area.
As I descend with this upturned glass container, the pocket of air shrinks, even though no air escapes. This is what happens to all the air spaces in a diver's body.
Which is why divers must remember to allow the pressure in those air spaces to equalize with the water pressure outside. Flesh and bones won't crush, but there is hidden danger in a diver's blood. Sue should have surfaced slowly, over 90 seconds. But in this emergency, instinct took over. She cut out those vital seconds. She put her life on the line.
She was like a rocket going up to the surface. She was just disappeared. And I wear a small computer, which gives you a warning if you're going up too fast. And I went up as quickly as my computer would allow me. I got to the surface, and Sue was unconscious. I was looking after Sue, trying to make sure that she was as comfortable as possible, that she was still actually breathing.
Push! Push!
Sue started to come round and was obviously in great distress. Very, very dizzy. She couldn't breathe.
Is she okay?
She was constantly complaining, I can't breathe, I can't breathe.
Is she breathing? She's breathing. We've got a pulse. Get the others up in case they've got the same problem. Susan? Susan? Can you hear me? Susan?
Explosive charges brought the others back to the surface.
She was lapsing in and out of consciousness.
7 miles north of Ilfracombe.
She was constantly complaining, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And so she was pulling her neck seal out from her throat.
What could possibly have gone wrong? Sue was a trained diver, yet she broke the diver's golden rule. She risked it. On top of that, she knew she was heading for every diver's nightmare, the bends. A diver's blood behaves like a fizzy drink in a bottle. With the cap on, there's no fizz. The gas which creates it is trapped in the drink by pressure. Opening the bottle releases the pressure all at once. That makes the bubbles come bursting out. These laboratory pictures show the same thing happening in a diver's blood vessels. Tiny bubbles of nitrogen gas form and stop the blood delivering vital food and oxygen to body tissue. That's what causes the bends. They can kill. When Sue reached the surface, her problems were only just beginning. She was still under pressure, not from water, but from the weight of the air in the atmosphere above her. It's called atmospheric pressure. Like the pressure underwater, it changes as you go up and down. Pilots depend on changing air pressure to measure how high they are. A Flight 22 Squadron from RAF Chivner headed out to Sue and John, knowing they had to get her to a place where her body pressure could be controlled safely, a recompression chamber.
I'm a doctor, a general practitioner working near the airbase, and on that day I was present on the helicopter to assist with the care of casualties. When we arrived, as always, we asked the name of the person. It wasn't very obvious who she was because of the diving suit and so on, but she mentioned her name, and I realized immediately that she was actually one of my patients, which was a happy coincidence.
I couldn't believe it. There was the normal crew on the helicopter, and Dr. Polk was actually on board as well. So she was in the best possible hands from the moment she was on board.
She'd come up in a hurry, feeling unwell, assumed that this was the bends. If it's in the joints, it makes the joints very painful and they bend over, hence the name, the bends. If the bubbles go into the lung, they find it very, very difficult to breathe, and that's known to divers as the chokes. But worst of all is if the bubbles are in the brain or the spinal cord, when they cause not only great pain, but also paralysis that may be permanent, or in the worst case, death.
To keep the bubbles at bay, Sue had to stay under as much air pressure as possible. It would mean hugging the ground every step of the way.
Height is extremely important when it comes to flying a diver with the bends to the recompression chamber. It is absolutely standard practice to stay as low as possible, even though that means taking a bit longer and an indirect route to the recompression chamber, and the air crews train to do this. We set off by the fastest possible route, but staying as low as possible. So we have two options really. One is to fly, which is completely impracticable, and the other one is to follow a small river inland on the North Cornwall coast to join up with the River Tamar, which then runs all the way to Fort Bovisand in Plymouth Sound.
Just a few meters made all the difference.
It's about halfway down cross-country to Plymouth, but the helicopter had to go relatively high over a hill.
As we climbed that relatively small height, Susan complained of increasing pain in her chest because she was now conscious, and she became confused and restive.
When we flew over the hill, she complained about chest pains. She was certainly very uncomfortable.
If we climb above sea level, the pressure drops. If the pressure drops, of course, the nitrogen bubbles will enlarge and more will form. And this is exactly what we were keen to avoid, because those bubbles forming and enlarging within the brain were doing the harm.
The size of a bubble depends on a balance of forces, an equilibrium between the force of gas particles inside the bubble pushing out and the force of particles on the outside pushing in. As Sue flew up, there were less air particles squeezing her body and every bubble in her blood. But the particles inside each bubble pushed out just as strongly as before. So in the battle to fix the size of the bubbles, the particles inside started to win. They swelled the bubbles up until a new equilibrium was reached, with larger, more painful, more dangerous bubbles. With the helicopter flying low once again, there was plenty of air above Susan. It weighed down on her body, keeping the pressure on the bubbles in her blood. But between Susan and safety was one last obstacle.
The worst obstacles, unfortunately, were left till last.
Height restrictions up ahead. We've got the bridges and the wires. Are you happy to go over them?
Between Plymouth and Salt Ash, there are the road and rail bridges, and to climb to go over those, we would probably have had to have gone to 150 or even 200 metres. And we'd already seen that that caused serious problems. In the way that we could go under, we would go under rather than over.
There were a lot of large yachts, and we flew down between the masts of these yachts and underneath the bridge.
It's not a thing you do at any time except in an emergency.
Knowing the geography of that area, I knew that Bovisand was literally around the corner from the Tamar Bridge.
To dive again, but this time without getting wet.
Hello, we're just going to give you some oxygen to breathe, okay? My name's Nikki, I'm one of the nurses here. We're just going to take you to the chamber now.
Within a couple of minutes of leaving the house, inside that chamber and recompressed to a pressure equivalent to a depth of 18 metres, a little deeper than she'd actually dived.
The recompression chamber is a metal box, sealed, so gas can only go in and out through control valves.
Okay, on bottom, on oxygen, please.
Okay.
This is the life-saving trick the doctors needed to pull, to squeeze the bubbles in Sue's blood hard enough to make them vanish.
Susan's like this fizzy bottle of water. When I release the pressure, you can see the bubbles rise to the surface. Okay, George?
Recompression chambers don't just save people's lives. They're also used to train divers because they make the effects of pressure obvious. The works. The walls of the chamber are constantly bombarded by gas particles. When the chamber door is open, The number of particles hitting the inside every second balances the number hitting the outside. The pressure is in equilibrium, even if the door is then closed. To increase the pressure inside the chamber, more gas is pumped in. This means there are more gas particles bouncing off the walls and any body inside. So on average, they get hit more often. That's what makes the pressure. The chamber is strong like a diver's air cylinder, so it doesn't expand. The extra particles inside just push the pressure up.
Besides giving you a squeaky voice, a recompression chamber increases the pressure on the patient. This mimics the effect of being underwater without getting wet, and it reduces the bubble size. As we can see from our bottle of water, when we open it now, there's no bubbles.
The gas is still in the water, but now it's dissolved because of the high pressure.
As we decrease the pressure in the chamber, the bubbles are slowly released, and this simulates a safe diving.
Okay, 9 metres, Susan, pump oxygen, 5 minute air pressure.
Okay.
The recompression chamber saved Susan's life.
After an hour, she was given a pizza. It didn't taste very nice, apparently, because the pressure makes everything.
After 2.5 hours, it was perfectly safe to gradually reduce the pressure, open the chamber, and return her to the atmosphere.
There we go.
Bye-bye, Ben.
Be a good boy now, we won't be long. Bye-bye. Because John and I had been together for so long and we had this sort of kinship, the result of the day was because John was there to help me, and it's probably brought us closer together as a couple. The experience brought home the causes and effects of pressure and how important our training is, because it was that training that helped save my life on the day.
Susan was lucky to live. Now she can tell the tale of just what went wrong underwater.
The chest pains were very, very intense, and I wondered at first if maybe I was having a heart attack.
But in fact, her air cylinders had been contaminated with carbon monoxide gas.
It's effectively like breathing exhaust gases from a car with the same sort of effects.
I was keen to get back into the water as soon as possible, and I was extremely nervous. I felt very sick. I was quite tearful as well. But I was determined that I want this experience. I was very, very lucky. It wasn't my turn to go that day, and I've got John to thank, and also the crew of the helicopter, and Dr. Pote, and my lucky stars.